The events took place in 2008. He was reborn and went back 10 years, but it was not the same world as before. To reject the feelings of a third-class warrior would not lead to anything good. The guy thought that it would be like all the rebirths of the main character and he would get a cheat. All this suddenly appeared before his eyes, and he really got what he wanted. He decided that he had to study martial arts, and full of confidence, he looked down on the world of warriors. He would stop at nothing for martial arts. But danger was approaching, personal gain, the threat of death. He felt like a weakling who could not defend himself and his family. Since then, there has been only one way: to become a strong, powerful warrior, a role model for everyone. Only later did he realize that this was only the beginning. The events took place on April 5, 2008, in Yang City, First High School, 3rd year, 4th grade. Fang Ping finally began to accept the shocking reality. He went back in time 10 years. To be more precise, Fan Ping found himself in a world parallel to his past 10 years ago, because in fact this world was different from the one in his past life. A classmate approached teenagers Fan Ping and Chen Fan and told them that there were only 2 days to sign up for martial arts. The national college entrance exams were still in effect, but there was one more entrance subject: martial arts. Chen Fan said that the entry fee was 10,000, and he already knew he wouldn't make it, so there was no point in signing up. It was a waste of money. Their classmate said he wanted to enroll because it was the only opportunity for ordinary guys like them to become great. Suddenly, another classmate ran up to them, shouting that yesterday's news was about a grand master at the 8th stage. QI Group had officially challenged the head of Gujay's Pacific region, Tai Mu. The other 2 teenagers were very excited. Chen Fan said that his master had only broken through to the 7th stage a few years ago. Fang Ping did not understand anything that was said. He was still in shock at the price of 10,000 for a martial art. All the teenagers in the class were already listening to their conversation. The boys were enthusiastic about the fact that the master should have been in the top 30 or even the top 20. This was the case for Fang Ping, who was lucky enough to have watched a lot of isekai in his past life. So after watching the hype, he realized that being a martial arts master was prestigious. Fang Ping asked Chen Fan about that master, and quipped about the name of Manhwa Ping's husband. It made my classmate angry because it was disrespectful to address the master by his first name. Fang Ping realized that he had said too much. After that, he slapped himself on the mouth and apologized, saying that he hadn't been watching his language lately, and decided to look for everything on the internet, because he was suspicious. Then the teenager asked Chen Fan if there were any internet cafes nearby, and his friend replied that there were, and he always went there. Fang Ping smiled, saying that he hadn't been there for a long time. He was glad that the cafe was still there so he would meet that wonderful manager. The boy still remembered her when he was at school, but they would always appear in his dreams and do very uncomfortable things. So after studying, the teenager went there. But to his disappointment, the woman of his dreams was not there. Did Fang Ping have such terrible taste in his youth? When the girl saw him, she was delighted and offered to deposit $50 to his account at once, and then he would receive another 10. Fang Ping took the money out of his pocket, and there was only 20 baht in it. It looks like he wasn't swimming in money. The teenager refused, saying that he would only top up by 5. The girl called him poor and reluctantly replenished the card. Fang Ping thought that she had changed her attitude toward him too quickly. They really weren't happy to see you here without money, so he went inside and sat down at the computer. When he found what he was looking for, he could only make a mate. He was so shocked. At that moment, Fan Ping clearly decided that he was obliged to take part in that exam. In this world, there were a few unspoken rules that everyone knew from childhood. No matter what you were going to do, the power could give you everything, as well as take it away. Local practices were not very different from those in the novels. The cultivator has unsurpassed taste and influence in society. They were divided into 9 stages, from low to high. In this world, only practitioners are allowed to start companies. As soon as someone reached the 4th stage, he could become a governor. The same was true for the entertainment industry. That's why Yang Jian said it was the only way to stand out from the crowd and become someone really strong. Of course, it couldn't have been that simple. The entry fee alone was $10,000, and there were only 2 days left before the registration deadline of 1 day. All the characters from the manga and anime were reborn with outright cheats. But Fan Ming couldn't even pay the fee. He was indignant that he didn't have the promised cheats. Suddenly, he realized that perhaps in this world his family was wealthy enough to live in their villa somewhere. But when he got home, Fan Ming was shocked to find a reality that differed from his high expectations. He had no choice but to accept this fact and move on. The teenager carefully opened the door to the apartment and looked around. He immediately smelled the familiar smell of dampness. It was right. It was the same shabby house. Suddenly, someone was running quickly toward Fan Ping, and someone's footsteps were heard. A girl came running, stood in front of the teenager, and yelled at him. After that, she stretched out her hand and ordered Fan Ping to give her money back. The guy immediately recognized this round, sweet face. Then, Fan Ping just grabbed the girl's cheeks and started squeezing them. He recognized his sister, Fang Yuan. He had always felt sorry that she had lost her pretty face when she grew up. But her sister did not like this behavior. She quickly took his hands off her face and ordered him to return her money. Of course, Fan Ping didn't understand what kind of money she was talking about. Fang Yuan said that her mother had left $50 for the two of them, but she only had $5 on her desk. The teenager quickly realized that part of his 28 was hers. Then Fan Ping played dumb and told Fang Yuan to look for more. Maybe she had already spent it. After that, the sister ran to her mother and told her to tell her brother something, and the teenager realized that he regularly demanded pocket money. Li Yuyin's mother tried to reassure her sister that her father would be back for dinner soon. The woman looked quite young. Fan Ping recalled that at that time, his mother had to take a part-time job with a monthly salary of $800 to take care of him and his sister. So the teenager simply had no right to ask her for $10,000. At that moment, Fan Mingzhong's father walked in, who was an ordinary worker at the factory, and most likely had health problems if he inhaled a lot of dust at work. His salary was $3,000 a month. The teenager immediately wanted to ask his father something, but he interrupted him and yelled at Fan Ming for still wearing his school uniform. His sister also intervened in the conversation, telling his father that his brother had stolen her money again. The teenager tried to justify himself. Meanwhile, the family sat down to dinner. Fan Ping realized that if he failed the exam, he would be unable to do anything to change his life and the lives of his family. Then the teenager took a deep breath to gather his strength, after which he told his father that he had decided to take part in the National Martial Arts exam. Everyone, including my father, was shocked by this statement. Fan Ping immediately realized that he had hoped in vain that his family would be able to afford the entrance fee. So he'd better think about alternative ways. Fan Ping immediately laughed and told them not to take him seriously. Then the father put his bank card on the table and handed it to his son. Fan Ping could not believe his eyes. The man asked if the admission fee was $10,000, and then added that he had heard about it from his colleagues. But the teenager did not express a strong desire, so the father did not mention it. Fan Mingzhong said that it didn't matter whether he passed the exam or not. If his heart wanted it, it was worth it. The teenager thought that even though his family was so poor, his father gave him the money and even made sure that he didn't worry. Fan Ping took the card in his hands and thought about how he could repay his father for his support and understanding. But then I clenched it and clearly decided that I could handle whatever happened. The next day, Fan Ping went to the bank. He took the money out and held it in his hands and could not look away. As soon as Fan Ping touched the bills, a notification appeared in front of his eyes. In his past life, the teenager read a bunch of stories about people who were reborn. He knew for sure that it was nothing but a system. It was a bright day. The events moved to the teenager's house. Fan Ping was lying on his bed, in a simple room with minimal furniture. He thought about what happened when he picked up the bills, based on what happened at the ATM. The balance was replenished when he received cash, but only if it belonged to him. Otherwise, nothing would happen. Also, if there was not enough money, it was not charged. So if the balance has changed, then Fan Ming could also raise his energy and intelligence. Then the teenager closed his eyes and asked the system to raise his status, but nothing happened. Everything remained in its place. At this point, Fan Ping realized that things were not that simple. Then he began to invent various tricks to make the system do what he wanted. But it was all in vain. Fan Ping started to get angry at his cheats. He started shouting at the system that it was late and ordered it to raise its energy, otherwise he would delete it. Suddenly everything turned red. The system showed that the energy increased by 0.1 and the balance decreased to 0. Fan Ping was simply desperate. The system informed him that the energy had increased. The teenager did not know how to react to what had just happened. 10,000. His father's savings raised the energy rate by only 0.1. But even so, Fan Ping still had an unrealistic feeling that he could move mountains. Suddenly, the teenager realized something and abruptly jumped up from his seat. The money was still there. Fan Ping breathed out a sigh of relief. It seems that the virtual account had no effect on the real world. Fang Yuan stood outside the door and thought that her brother had finally gone mad. The events moved to the school. The teacher stood at the blackboard and told everyone to be quiet, and said that everyone who was registered for the exam had to come to the teacher's office to register. Then, Fang Ping got up from his seat, and his classmate Chen Fan asked if he was going to the restroom again. The teenager was embarrassed and quietly said that he was going to register. My friend was shocked by the news and didn't even say anything. The events moved to the teacher's classroom. A girl stood up and said that she did not expect to see him, and added that his cultivation was as worthless as his dignity. Fang Ping was offended to hear this, but he had no way to respond, because his value was 1.1, which must have been terribly low. Then Yang Jian hugged him and said that the teenager probably hadn't even tested yet, and a friend next to him said that he had gotten 108 last time. But Fan Ping could not match his score. Suddenly, the teenager's eyes widened dramatically. He no longer listened to what others were saying, because the difference was just enormous. A neighbor said he could have come by after school and checked. Yang Jian stood up abruptly and enthusiastically said that Wu Hao was a major if he managed to get a cultivation tester. The guy explained that it was important for him to check his cultivation regularly, so his father bought him one, but it was worse than the original one. Yang Jian still shouted enthusiastically that even the oldest used tester cost hundreds of thousands of dollars. Fang Ping could not get over the previous statement, and then he finds out how expensive everything was. In his previous life, even the coolest blood-measuring device did not cost more than 1,000. The events moved to Wu Hao's room. He showed me his expensive furniture and a tester. Fang Ping sat down in a chair and calmly waited for the result. Wu Hao sat for a long time and stared at the screen in silence. Then Fan Ping asked him what had happened there and why he was silent. Wu Hao was shocked because this poor man's cultivation was indeed 113. The guy first pressed some buttons on the device and then pulled the blue lever. Meanwhile, Fan Ping felt strange things in and around his body. Wu Hao shouted the teenager's name and covered his mouth in shock, and then shouted that his cultivation was indeed 113. Fang Ping didn't seem surprised, only thinking that he should have guessed that this world and the system used different counting systems. The ratio was 1 to 1,000. Wu Hao turned to the young man and asked why he was hiding it, since he was a second-level cultivator, but he was not surprised at all. Meanwhile, my father was sitting in the room holding a pile of money. He said he had heard from the boss that martial arts required tens of thousands for simple pills. My father said that they had 20,000 left from their savings, but if that wasn't enough, he would try to find more. From behind the wall, the parents heard Fan Yuan screaming, accusing her brother of cheating, because those with a cultivation of 110 were considered martial practitioners. Fang Ping took hold of his sister's cheeks again, but this time he was more forceful, and said that there was nothing you could do, it's just that her brother is very talented, and this year he will take the martial arts exam. A mother came in and called her son for a conversation. My sister didn't miss the moment to cry, saying that Fan Ping was insulting her. The teenager immediately got up and left, but inside he felt that something was happening. He walked into his parents' room and felt a seriously suffocating aura. The father called his son by his full name and ordered him to come over, and then took Fang Ping's hand and put the amount in it, saying that they had decided to support him and asked him to tell them if it was not enough. The teenager had a system in front of his eyes again, and his balance was replenished by 20,000. The father said that they had almost deprived his son of a chance for a great future because of their inattention. But now they would definitely support him in the exam. Fan Ping could not say a word in shock. In his room, he sat at the table and looked at a pile of money, considering spending it on pills. Fang Ping imagined what it was like to buy these pills. At first, everything was fine. But then unpleasant incidents happened. The teenager realized that compared to the system, the pills were completely useless. Fang Ping looked at the system in front of his eyes and wondered what he should do next. Meanwhile, the events moved to the school. The teenager was climbing the stairs and thinking about the events of the previous night. He tried to boost his spirit, and the system still wrote off 10,000 for intelligence. but it feels as if all of Fan Ping's thoughts have been purified and enlightened. My thoughts started running at an incredible speed. It was an incredible feeling. Attention, analysis, and memory have been strengthened many times over. So Fan Ping spent the night learning and realizing his new abilities. Suddenly, someone jumped down the stairs and took Fan Ping with him, who was soaking wet that he didn't even have time to react. So the teenager landed headfirst on the asphalt and was hit hard. Fang Ping yelled at Yang Zheng for doing so and called him sick. The teenager laughed in response, saying that he had been good at hiding the fact that he had as many as 113 units. Other teenagers came down and said hello to Fan Ping. The boy was ashamed because he knew that the whole school knew about it. Suddenly, someone came up to Yang Zheng and grabbed her by the collar. Then he just threw the poor guy back. This weirdo came up to him and just stared at Fan Ping, who had no muscles and a strong body, but he had 5 points more. The guy just burst into tears and cursed, muttering something under his breath. At that moment, an old man with glasses came up the stairs and said that he had finally found Fan Ping. He gave the teenager a pile of books and told him to hold them. Fan Ping looked at these heavy books in shock. The first of them read, Basic Theory of Martial Arts, Volume 1. The man told Fan Ping to read all these books, and they had training schemes. After all, he was now a practitioner as well, even though he was one step behind the others. This certainly scared the teenager, but the man said that the teachers would help him. Fan Ping had no choice but to thank the teacher. The teenager had nothing to do in class until now, so it was a great idea. The man was about to leave, and then said that he needed a few people. He had a task for them. The guys were in no hurry to volunteer and waited for explanations. The man went on to say that he had asked Director Xiao Zhang several times before he got the opportunity. He told them to pick up Jin Yan, one of the best at Nanjing University. A guy arrived in Yancheng. He was a tall young man named Wang Jingyan. He was a fifth-year student at the Faculty of Science and Technology. Across the street, schoolchildren met him with shouts and cheers. Wang Jinyang did not expect such a reception, but he did not seem to mind. Fan Ping finally saw this guy and he looked rather mediocre, even though Wang Jinyang was a martial arts practitioner. He seemed to be just another dreamer who had just entered the university. But earlier, when Fan Ping asked who Wang Yang was, the classmate simply exploded at the disrespect. The teenager was shocked and said that he was not supposed to know about all their dialogues. One of the girls hit herself on the head, saying she would tell him. She asked permission to tell Fan Ping about his magnificence. After that, the girl pointed her finger at the teenager and shouted his name. Fan Ping was shocked and already regretted asking. So Wang Yang was a 19-year-old man, 178 centimeters tall, from the city of Yang. He loved apples and had no things he didn't like. Most of all, he liked to spend his time tempering his mind and body. Despite the fact that he was not rich, he never gave up on his path to practice, and at the last exam he got into the university as the best practitioner. He was also the first to enter the university from a lower-class background. Wang Yang was only in his first year, but he was already considered a cultivator. The girl said that even someone as ignorant as Fan Ping might not have known about the hope of all the lower-class students, Wang's older brother. The events moved to the bus, where everyone was sitting around Wang Yang and congratulating him. It seemed that the man was uncomfortable, ashamed of such attention to his person. The teenagers pounced on Brother Wang to share his secret of how he was able to enter the world of martial arts from the lower classes. This question shocked Wang Yang. He began by saying that there were 5 main tests of martial arts: political career, culture, specialty, experience, and physical strength. But the most important areas were experience and physical strength. Each of those present had a chi value of 110, but even so, it was just enough to meet their needs. It was dangerous. Wang Yang went on to say that if they can control emotions, the result will be different to some extent. Everyone looked at the man with wide eyes. They listened attentively, only Fan Ping was different from them. But at this point he also perked up his ears. Wang Yang went on to say that happiness, anger, sadness, enthusiasm. If any of these emotions go beyond the limits, then QI will start to boil and become unstable, especially anger. He told the teenagers to imagine that they had been humiliated. Fan Ping did not understand how one could imagine feelings. Wang Yang went on to say that if they had experience, the physical test was not a problem. It was just a test of explosive power. But this did not apply to those who achieved results by taking drugs with their parents' money. He went on to say that if they could kill a chicken or a pet without hesitation, What can we say about people? Wang Yang said that killing people was completely different from slaughtering chickens. Fang Ping's eyes went to his forehead at these words. The guy spoke about it so naturally, he probably didn't kill. But there were strict laws in this world. Wang Yang shouldn't have been able to do that, Fan Ping thought. Moreover, he was just a freshman. Meanwhile, the events moved to Fang Ping's house. The boy had to go back to school for Wang Yang's speech. Fan Ping lay on his bed and thought about the freshman's story. These words about killing people and chickens never left his mind. Fang Ping did not understand how Wang Yang could talk about such horrible things so naturally. The teenager had no doubt that this man had killed before. Suddenly, someone's phone rang. Wang Yang picked up the phone. He was told that the target had fled to Kanshan, which is the border between the provinces. The man interrupted the interlocutor, saying that he said not to do anything until he arrived, and added that the target was to stay put. He was told that if the target escaped, the people above would not mind sacrificing them. Wang Yang said that he would pay the interlocutor 500,000 to catch the target alive or dead. Meanwhile, Fan Ping was sitting on his bed thinking about something. The teenager tried to concentrate. Suddenly, some kind of power began to appear between his fingers. And then, Fan Ping gained another 0.1 to his energy. The system gave him a notification about the replenishment. When suddenly something terrible happened. Fang Ping's eyes seemed to darken, to become colorless. After that, the teenager seemed to start choking, and his muscles tensed so much that his veins began to protrude. Fan Ping grabbed the bedspread with his hand and just fell on the bed. It seemed that the teenager felt every vein in his body. It was a hellish pain that could not be tolerated. Fang Ping was breaking out in a cold sweat. The teenager found the strength to get up and sit on the bed. Last time everything was fine, he did not feel such pain. Fang Ping looked at his hands. He thought that perhaps his body could not withstand the pressure, or that it was a side effect of the merging of external energy into his body. Over time, Fang Ping even began to get used to it, as if his blood was boiling and spilling out at a high rate. Suddenly, the teenager remembered something. He had to take Wang Yang to school. Fang Ping was running so fast that he didn't notice the man in black and just crashed into him. It seemed to be a courier or just a strange resident of the house. Fang Ping turned around and apologized to the man, but he didn't even turn to him when he fell to the floor. A knife also fell out of his pocket. The man quickly put the weapon back into his sleeve, which Fan Ping did not even notice. The teenager was coming out of the building, but thought it was a strange encounter because he didn't even remember the resident. The man just glanced at Fan Ping and gave her a sideways glance. Meanwhile, Wang Yang entered the bus and apologized for being late. His fan immediately turned on when she saw the man and motioned for him to sit with her. Yang Jian sat next to him and said how wonderful it was that the teachers had invited Wang Yang to help the lower grades with the exam. Fang Ping asked what was so special about a graduate returning to his school. A classmate replied that this was normal for an ordinary graduate, but with Wang Yang it was a completely different story. Because he was a cultivator. Yang Jian continued to speak, only to have Fang Ping think about it, because Wang Yang was a cultivator worth his weight in gold in the entire city as a freshman. Suddenly, a large cultivator put his hand on Fan Ping's shoulder. He said that he knew the teenager was trying his best to become a cultivator, but he should have known that his body was weak. He went on to say that he didn't know what pills Fan Ping was taking, but his QI had risen too high recently, and such medicines should not be consumed like candy. One mistake could have cost him his career as a cultivator. Wang Yang advised that if Fan Ping builds up his strength without physical training, it will only lead to death. The teenager merely thanked Brother Wang, and was mentally shocked that he could accurately detect the concentration of his QI with a single glance. Meanwhile, night fell. Fan Ping was playing sports outside. The teenager did a lot of different exercises. He was covered in sweat, but he didn't feel tired at all, so he had to consult with Brother Wang to optimize his training. Suddenly, Fan Ping felt something very strange inside. He quickly turned around because the feeling was external. In the window, the teenager saw a man he had bumped into during the day. It seems that he also lived in this house. Fang Ping looked out the window at this man for a long time. Was it really bloodlust? A very frightening force. The teenager entered the apartment because it was none of his business. He had more important things to do. Meanwhile, the news was talking about a second-stage cultivator who killed his partner without sharing the loot. The investigation revealed that the suspect was in Yangtze, Changshan. My sister was watching the news and said that she should not go to school because if something happened to her, the whole world would not survive it. Fang Ping said that no one else wanted her except them, and after these words, a bag of chips flew at the teenager. When suddenly the guy did sense something suspicious in the news. They said that someone processed the video through the program and got a crystal clear photo of the weapon. Then Fan Ping sat down closer to the TV and looked at the photo. The teenager was sure he had seen this knife somewhere before. Meanwhile, the events moved to the night city. Someone was holding the same knife. After that, the man grabbed him and raised him high above the victim. It turned out to be Fan Ping. The teenager saw before his eyes this weapon that would have killed him. Suddenly, the guy woke up and jumped out of bed because he remembered something. The knife that was shown in the video. He had seen it on a man he had bumped into in the morning. It was definitely him, without a doubt. Among them, the killer cultivator was in the building, and he knew about Fan Ping. It was just a teenager's dream, but the blood business was definitely real. The news said that the suspect had hidden in a neighboring room. This coincidence seemed very eerie. Fan Ping began to fear that they might have targeted him as well. Maybe the criminal found out about his money, but the teenager's family is too poor for him. Suddenly, Fan Ping thought that it could be because of the system, but only the owner saw it, so no one else could know about it. The teenager was in a real panic, but he had to pull himself together because it was just a dream. Fan Ping had to get stronger. He decided to act quickly. He couldn't risk his health and the health of his family. Meanwhile, morning came. The news reports said that there were rumors that it was irrational to close the city because of one second-stage cultivator. Another expert said he thought people should stop underestimating the power of cultivators. After all, even the weakest cultivator could handle the police. Suddenly, the radio with the news was turned off and thrown into a box with the knife and other evidence. The man decided that he had to lay low because these bastards were serious about him. There were no cameras on this street, so he could hide here. Suddenly, someone knocked on the man's door. He was scared, but the knocking did not stop. It could have been the police, but he had no other choice. The man had to open the door to avoid arousing suspicion. He immediately pretended to be a nice neighbor, saying that he had just moved in yesterday. But when he opened the door, the man did not see anyone there, although it seemed that someone was hiding behind it. Then the criminal looked around the entrance and the neighbor quickly ran inside. It turned out to be Fan Ping, who was sitting in the killer's house on a chair and smiling cheerfully. The teenager began to put the food on the table, while the man tried to calm down and behave like a nice neighbor. The man said that Fan Ping must have gotten the wrong door. But the teenager denied it, saying that he wanted to watch football. But his TV was broken. So he went to his neighbor's house and even took food and drinks as compensation. Then, Fan Ping handed the man a drink and offered to watch it together. So the men were sitting on the couch watching a soccer match. The offender could barely hold on, showing all his aggression at the glass, clutching it. The man realized that this could not go on. It was all very strange. Perhaps Fan Ping was a scent agent. The teenager played his role of a naive idiot very skillfully, aggressively attacking the football players. The man first thought of removing Fan Ping before he caused any problems, but then realized that this was not an option. It was better to let him go. Then he asked the teenager if he was supposed to go to school, to which Fan Ping said it was closed on weekends. The man stood his ground and asked if the teenager's parents were worried about him. Then Fan Ping put his head down, made the saddest possible face, and said that the man just wanted to get rid of him. The perpetrator tried to pretend that it wasn't true and that he was just nervous. Fan Ping said he understood. He added that he just wanted to make friends with his new neighbor, but in the end, he just got in the way, as usual. Fan Ping shed a tear, saying that he was lonely without friends. The man started shouting and apologizing, feeling really empathetic to the poor man. Then, Fan Ping abruptly stood up and asked to be allowed to at least clean the house. The teenager said that there was not enough light here, so he should start with it. But the man did not let him do it. Fan Ping stood there in a stupor, wondering what was wrong. The man said that he was just used to living at dusk, so his harsh behavior was reflexive. Then the teenager said that in that case he would start with the bedroom. The perpetrator abruptly ran to the door and closed it with himself, saying that he could have cleaned up himself. Then the man asked Fan Ping if it was time for him to have lunch, and he wondered when the teenager would leave his apartment. Fan Ping looked at his watch, scratched the back of his head, and said that he had completely forgotten about it. After that, the teenager threw off the janitor's clothes and said he had to go. The criminal couldn't wait for Fan Ping to finally cross the threshold of his apartment, when suddenly the teenager caught his foot on a box that was standing right in the middle of the room. Fan Ping flew down, overturning the box of evidence. The man felt as if the ground had slipped from under his feet. The teenager turned to his neighbor and scratched his head with a guilty face. Things from the box were tipped over on the floor. There was blood in that knife. Fan Ping asked the man what it was. Then, the neighbor took a step towards the teenager. Fang Ping noticed something out of the corner of his eye and sensed danger. The perpetrator swung his leg, looking like he was going to hit the teenager. That's exactly what happened. He just threw Fan Ping away like a cat and the guy hit the wall. Then, the man grabbed his weapon, which was falling out of the box. The ribbon gracefully flew off the knife, revealing traces of blood on it. Fan Ping could barely get up from his seat, coughing. Meanwhile, the man quickly managed to put a knife to the teenager's throat. Fang Ping felt an extreme thirst for blood, so the guy was in a very difficult situation. The threat to his life and health was at the highest level. Fan Ping decided to beg, saying that this information would not get out and the teenager would remain silent. The man said that the boy would not tell anyone anyway because he was going to kill him. Then, he swung at Fan Ping with a knife, lifting it high up. The teenager realized that he had to think of something quickly. He simply could not die like that. Suddenly, the perpetrator stopped. His body was out of control, just not obeying. Everything began to swim before his eyes, as if he had been drugged with something. Fang Ping realized that his plan had worked, so now was the right time. He quickly and sharply knocked the weapon out of his attacker's hands. The knife fell straight down, sticking into the ground. Fan Ping quickly got out from under the man's arms and ran forward. After that, he grabbed the first stick he saw and decided to use it as a weapon, hitting the man with the stick as hard as he could. After that, Fan Ping said he thought his pills were starting to work in his favor. And then he looked at the stick and thought it was a good decision to leave it in the apartment when he came in. So now the offender was in a difficult position, defeated by an ordinary teenager. Suddenly, the man stood up. Fang Ping was shocked that he had not yet fallen asleep as he should have. Then the good neighbor's fist flew straight at the teenager. He hit Fang Ping with all his might so hard that the boy flew backwards. The teenager's mouth was bleeding from such a strong blow. But it seemed that Fan Ping pulled himself together and threw his offender back. He would laugh out loud and think that he had been reborn with the ability to use the system. So he simply could not miss this chance. Fan Ping had to survive. Then the teenager gripped the stick tightly. After that, he struck his attacker many sharp and quick blows with the weapon. Fang Ping did it so skillfully that now the man's mouth was bleeding. He had no time to defend himself. So the man just fell to the floor, hitting his head on the wall. It seemed that now the criminal was definitely defeated and posed no danger. Fang Ping wiped the blood from his face and thought that he had underestimated the second-stage cultivator. If it wasn't for the sleeping pill, he would have been dead. Meanwhile, it was getting dark outside. Fang Ping sat by the bag and counted the money, but his balance in the system did not increase. He said out loud that it seemed the system did not consider the money his property. Meanwhile, the offender came to. He figured the teenager had a lot of blood and QI, so he must have been studying martial arts. Juan didn't expect to be beaten by a martial arts student. Maybe he was an agent. PS blood supply is the same as energy in the system. Then he yelled at Fan Ping and asked who he was. The teenager said he was Detective X and his job was to catch intruders. Juan yelled and asked where he got the damn tuxedo from. Fang Ping asked if he had stolen only 200,000 yuan and 2 bottles of pills, and the man told him to mind his own business. Juan needed this medicine to advance to the 3rd stage of cultivation, but he didn't expect it to fall into the hands of this bastard. Then the man suddenly had an idea and turned to Fan Ping. He asked if the teenager would like to make a deal with him. Juan looked directly into Fang Ping's eyes and with a serious expression hoped that he would agree. The teenager answered him in kind, trying to understand the man's true intentions. The man told Fan Ping that if he released him, he could take the pills and the money. He also had 2 more bottles, one with simple pills and the other for the next stage. He also had a bottle of bone-hardening pills and 2 bottles of second-stage treatment pills. Fang Ping calculated that the market value of all these things would be 5240,000 yuan. He was shocked that there were such prices in the martial arts world. Juan felt that he had hit the nail on the head and asked the teenager how he felt about the offer. He said that these QI and blood-tempering pills would be good for the teenager's exam, as would the pill the teenager was holding in his hands of the 1st stage. All this is necessary for a martial artist. The man went on to say that after continuous fighting, these pills were more effective than the usual ones for hardening QI and blood. In fact, martial arts masters are ordinary people who broke through the limits of the human body. So if you didn't have strong bones and didn't take pills to protect weak organs, your QI and blood would exceed the limits. And then the teenager will definitely die. Huan finished and asked Fan Ping if he was done thinking. He said that if the teenager let him go, it would all be his. The man went on to say that if Fang Ping turned him over to the police, he would not be able to get it all back. Even if he killed Huan, it would not be over. The man went on to say that the trail he left behind could lead them to his location in about a month and 10 days, so Fang Ping would not get away with it. Huang said that the teenager was very young. His QI and blood were very high, so he had a great future ahead of him. In fact, the man was stalling for time so that the effect of the substance he was given would wear off, and Huan would become stronger. Fang Ping thought about the man's words. He had to decide something quickly. If the teenager let him go, Huan could come back and take revenge, because a second-stage martial artist is too dangerous. So it's better to just give these things to the police. But the contents of the bag were worth millions, so they would definitely confiscate it. His family didn't have that kind of money. To become a martial arts master, the level of QI and blood had to be 150. Even with the system, he still had to have money to become a master. And 5 million could help him a lot in this. Fang Ping could not decide what to do in this situation. He thought to ask Wang Yang for help. After all, resources were important for a martial artist, so the guy could just kill the teenager and take everything for himself. Huan asked why Fang Ping had taken so long to think about it, because it was a lot of money, and the teenager was the only one who would benefit. The guy was hesitant. He could only pray that his choice would not lead to death. Then, Fan Ping picked up a stick that was lying on the floor. Then he squeezed it tightly. Huan began to panic and scream because he did not understand what Fan Ping was going to do. The teenager said that he thought for a long time whether his husband would let him go if he agreed to the deal. Huan began to scream and show fear, saying that he would definitely let him go because he was a man of his word. Meanwhile, his arm was almost out. The effect of the sleeping pills had worn off. Then Huan seized the moment and attacked Fan Ping with his fists, saying that he was now a dead man. But the teenager was not so simple and stupid. He swung his stick and hit Huan first. Meanwhile, the events moved to Yangtze Changshan. It was dark, so someone turned on a flashlight. It was a guy who was wandering around the forest so late for some reason. It turned out that it was Wang Yang. The guy thought he had searched everything, but he couldn't find where the rat was hiding. Suddenly, his phone started ringing. He picked up the phone. He introduced himself as Fan Ping. Wang Yang did not expect to hear from the teenager so late at night, so he immediately asked the purpose of the call. Fang Ping started from afar, asking if the guy was still in town, and then said that he had met the criminal the police were looking for and accidentally harmed him. The teenager said that Wang Yang was the only master he knew, so he decided to call him. The events moved to Fang Ping's house, or rather to apartment 201, where the criminal was. Wang Yang arrived inside and couldn't believe that a second-stage martial artist had been caught by an ordinary teenager, because even Wang Yang had to be careful when meeting Huan Wu. At that moment, Fan Ping opened the door and welcomed his brother, saying that he thought he would not come. Wang Yang said that it was nothing, but warned that if Fan Ping was telling the truth, he would not be able to help him. Suddenly, Wang Yang's expression changed dramatically, because he saw Huan Wu in front of him, all wrapped up and unconscious. Fan Ping approached the man, saying that he had accidentally fainted, and then the teenager asked Brother Wang if he would receive a reward if he turned the thief into the police. But Wang Yang didn't really understand what Fan Ping meant, so he asked for clarification. Then the teenager opened the bag and got straight to the point, saying that he had found valuable items that the thief had been carrying. Then he took them in his hands and said that he would like to take them for himself. Wang Yang asked with a smile if Fan Ping really wanted to take everything for himself, and then said that Huan was called a criminal because he killed many martial artists. Fang Ping replied that this was why he had asked for his help, and then offered to take it and keep it, saying that he would share it. At that time, Wang Yang breathed a sigh of relief and said that the teenager was a smart guy and they would definitely meet in the future. And then, he went up to the criminal and grabbed him and told Fan Ping that he couldn't use the second-stage pills, so he offered to exchange them for one first-stage pill and would add another $1,000,000 to his budget. Wang Yang added that he had almost broken through to a new stage, so he could afford the pills, and then he got them, saying that the price was just out of this world. He continued that Fan Ping would not be able to use them, so he would take them for himself, adding that after the breakthrough, it would be easier for the teenager to gather resources, and he could call Wang Yang if he needed help. Then he said he was done talking, adding that Fang Ping shouldn't worry about Huan Wu. He would work something out with him. The teenager thanked his brother, saying that he would take what he didn't need. He was surprised that the man still had items in his pockets, so Wang Yang had to check something. Fang Ping was happy that everything was going the way he wanted it to. But there was one more thing. Now the teenager could increase the balance in the system with additional training, and it would be easier to get into university. But something strange happened. The system counted all the items as 240000 yuan instead of 350000. It turned out that the system ignored the market value and only judged goods by their actual price. But there was one more thing that Fang Ping had forgotten about. The teenager returned to Wang Yang and asked what to do if the police wanted to get his confession. But Brother Wang said that Huan Wu would not even have the opportunity to open his mouth. After that, he turned to Fan Ping and said that they had been looking for this man for a long time, so he would be killed anyway. A few days earlier, someone receives a notification on their phone. It was a message from a bank in Yangtze City saying that Wang Yang had sent someone 1 million yuan. Suddenly, the system appeared and the balance began to replenish. After that, it simply exploded and shattered into small pieces. But then it reassembled and took on a new appearance. It turned out that Fang Ping had updated the system. Indicators and units of measurement were no longer the same as before. In the previous version of the system, energy could be increased by only 0.1, which was about 10 units. But since the update, the indicators have become more precise. Now Fang Ping could only use 1,000 from the balance to increase the energy by 1. It worked. The energy really increased by 1, without any additional persuasion. If you had money, you could improve. But the poor trained themselves. Wang Yang also sent Fan Ping a message asking for money. The master said that the teenager would need it. Fang Ping thanked him, and Brother Wang said in response that he had admired only a few people since birth, and the teenager was one of them. No sooner had Fan Ping had his fun than his sister flew onto his back, screaming that she was hungry. The teenager replied that her sister could have cooked herself something. Feng Yuan asked how a sister like her could leave her brother alone at home. But before that, she said quietly that she could use his money and not spend hers. Fan Ping heard this and was outraged. Then his sister gave him something else. Feng Yuan added that Wang Jinyan had sent it to him. My sister rubbed her cheeks in pain and said that she had heard this name before. And then, her heart starting to beat faster, she looked at her brother and screamed at him that he was the same martial arts practitioner from Nanjiang. The sister began to shout and ask questions enthusiastically when her clumsy brother managed to meet Wang Yang himself and asked for an autograph. Wang Yang asked if his sister was a member of his fan club, Jin. She replied that an idiot like Fang Ping would never understand how hot Wang Yang was, to which his brother replied that he did not want an idiot to tell him that. Fang Yuan went on to say that in Yang City, 3 out of 5 girls liked him, and the rest were simply delighted with Wang Yang. There were about 5,000 students in their school. The ratio of girls to boys was 3-2, and the autographed paper was worth $10,000, 3,000 people, and add another 500 fanboys. It came out to $35,000. Fang Wen said that Wang Yang was the best, and Fang Ping resented that the girl loved him because of that. Then the sister turned to her brother and said that when the time came, she would get 70%, and he would get 30%, and they would earn until their piggy bank was full. Her sister began to look for the teenager, even offering to divide everything 60% to 40%. Meanwhile, Fan Ping went outside and just walked along the road, holding the package from Wang Yang. Then the teenager decided to open his own parcel. Wang Yang never answered the teenager when he asked him. There was something inside that took Fang Ping's breath away just looking at it. These were books on techniques that the teenager needed for his exams. Fang Ping found it when he was in an internet cafe. To become a martial arts master, 2 conditions must be met. The first is a high level of QI and blood, energy. To become a martial arts master, you need to cross the energy level of 150. Secondly, mature bones. Strong bones could not be obtained only through pills. It is also necessary to learn special techniques. Fang Ping was worried that he wouldn't be able to find books on techniques, but he didn't expect Wang Yang to send them to him. But the yard near the teenager's house was small and he might not have been able to train there. Suddenly, a man with a booklet appeared in front of the teenager's eyes, offering to buy services now so that he would not have to pay for utilities later. The events moved to the city's elite apartments. The man talked about all the advantages of this neighborhood and the area. It was a two-story complex with an area of 230 square meters and a cost of 86,000 yuan. Fang Ping said that the house looked very cool, so the price was expensive. And the man decided that his client looked like a teenager. So he suggested that the guy look at other apartments, cheaper ones. But Fan Ping said there was no need for that. The teenager asked if there were any discounts or offers that he could take advantage of and took out his card. Then the man just pounced on Fang Ping with calf's eyes and the keys to the apartment and praised for the purchase. After that, he took out a contract and offered to sign it now so that we could get a 5% discount, and the company would cover the cost of maintenance and utilities. Fang Ping decided to sign the contract, and the man continued to praise the teenager, saying that when he met him, he immediately realized that he had a great future ahead of him. The guy was not interested in this flattery, he just wanted to know when he could move. He was told that any time. Fang Ping was walking back and thinking about how to tell his parents about his purchase, when he suddenly saw a crowd outside, watching a battle between Grandmaster Ma and Tai Mu. He was interested and decided to see what was going on there. The reporters said that they were 5 kilometers away and still felt a lot of pressure. The dense forest was almost destroyed. Everything was happening so fast that it was impossible to see people among the explosions and dust. Tai Mu's strike, called the Wrath of Thunder, caused a landslide, and Grandmaster Ma delivered his signature 10-0-0-0 horse leap kick in response. There was a wall of dust and smoke, with a lot of stones flying. The reporter started running away and screaming because it was dangerous, when suddenly there was a loud explosion. After that, everything started to make noise and the broadcast stopped. The audience discussed how strong Masters Ma and Tai Mu were. One man said he had heard that they fought for fun and not even to their fullest potential. Fang Ping was shocked, because Master Ma's signature kick resembled a rocket-propelled grenade launcher. It was the same as a nuclear bomb, and it was half the power. The reporter apologized for the inconvenience, saying that they did not think they would be hit. He added that if they were not third-stage masters, they would have died by now. Fang Ping was inspired, because the thought that the teenager would someday be like him made him very happy. Meanwhile, the events moved to a furniture store. The couple was discussing a sofa. The girl wanted to buy it, but it cost as much as 80,000 yuan. The man said he would think about it because it was quite expensive. Meanwhile, the consultant was given something in his earpiece. The couple started arguing, and the woman just fell to the floor and cried. The man had no choice but to agree to buy the sofa. But the consultant upset the couple by saying that this model had just been purchased by a young man. Everyone returned to the cash register and saw Fan Ping, who was paying with his card. The teenager felt these looks on him and waved to the customers. Meanwhile, the events moved to Fang Ping's house. His sister was helping his mother and said that his brother still hadn't returned home and his mother had to scold him. But the teenager was in his apartment practicing new techniques. Fang Ping had to keep his head and back straight, which was very difficult, and his sweat-soaked body showed it. The adult human skeleton consists of 206 bones. The human body also consists of blood and internal organs. As for martial artists, they had to be sure that different parts of their bodies interacted with each other. If a master wanted to strengthen his bones in a certain way, then regardless of the stage and rank, in this case it is worth learning the technique of hardening the body through the technique of strengthening the bones. This was all told to Fang Ping by Brother Wang on the phone. He went on to talk about the body tempering technique, which focused on compressing blood and QI so that the body's endurance would eventually increase, absorbing this energy, and the bones would become stronger. Fang Ping asked what to do if it was not possible to increase one's energy and strengthen the bones, should one continue to try to do so. Wang Yang replied that it was worth trying, because combining the two techniques could increase the effect of strengthening bones. Then the master said that if you want to raise your level, Fan Ping should choose one technique. If you train your upper body, it will be stronger. But if you train your lower body, you will improve your body balance and speed control. Fang Ping said he wanted to train his lower body and asked what technique he should do then. Wang Yang said it was the body tempering technique. It is the first step to training the lower body. He went on to say that training the lower body was quite difficult, as there was a risk of injury, which would make it impossible to even walk normally. Fang Ping said that none of this mattered to him because he could then run away if he was surrounded by enemies. Wang Yang replied that this was the most frightening strategy he had ever heard. This, of course, upset the teenager, but Brother John reminded him that he had forgotten to tell him something else. He said that Fang Ping's QI level was not bad, and he could even pass the martial arts exam, but there was one problem. Using the body tempering technique and training hard, one could increase the level of QI in blood, but it would decrease Fan Ping's true QI reserve. Wang Yang also said that the exam would not be the easiest. He went on to say that if the veins and arteries of the brain were damaged in any way, Fan Ping would not be able to pass the exam. The teenager did not accept these words. Perhaps he would stay for the second year. But if Fang Ping succeeds, he will increase his strength by several units. But that's assuming that his veins and arteries are normal. Fang Ping fell to the floor exhausted. His first cultivation was successful. Just as Brother Wang Yang said, the teenager's energy has increased significantly. Then Fang Ping closed his eyes and the system appeared in front of him, and he asked for more energy and intelligence. The system caught fire and the numbers started to change rapidly. Fang Ping abruptly exploded out of his seat in shock that everything was now increasing by more than one, and no recharging was required. Others could cultivate only once every 3 days, using hundreds of thousands of pills to replenish their energy. But Fang Ping could do it as long as his body could bear. The days passed quickly, and everyone did not notice the speed of time because of the constant training. Everyone trained, both girls and boys. It was also important to eat well and a lot to replenish energy and strength. And so March passed. There was only a little time left before the exam. Meanwhile, the events moved to the dark room. Someone told Luo Tie that no new martial artists had appeared in Yang City for a long time. Or rather, over the past 10 years, it has been catastrophic. Luo Ting, the deputy leader of the surveillance team, said that they had seen a lot of martial arts, but to no avail. He went on to say that if Wang Yang had not been cultivated last year, the city's education ministry would have collapsed. If at least 100 people with an energy level of 120 or higher do not show up, the Ministry of Martial Arts, of higher stages, or students. Luo Ting told Director Jin that he would be fired in that case. Meanwhile, it was Labor Day at school. Everyone gathered and was serious about the day. Some people could not stand it and started to panic, because this year it would be harder than last year. A lot of people were gathering near the schoolyard. The biggest cowards were encouraged with words and advice. Young John went up to Fan Ping and asked how much QI the teenager had, but he didn't know. Then someone called them. He was a tall man. He addressed Fan Ping by name. It seemed that he was looking for a teenager. The guy identified himself and asked what happened, when suddenly, Wu Hao swooped down on the man, saying that he was the deputy director of the Ministry of Education and a first-stage cultivator. A man named Tang Zhengping smiled and told Fan Ping that he had something to tell him in private. The men stepped back. Fang Ping was the first to say that it must have been something really important, so he suggested that we get to the point. Tang Zheping agreed and began to tell him why he had come to see the teenager. He started by saying that in addition to their city, there were 5 other counties in the district. Yancheng City, as a component, is not as good as the counties, but it is much stronger than these 5 counties. Every year, the Ministry of Education keeps track of the number of students who have successfully passed the exam. Tang Zheping continued that this time their students would be taking the exam together with students from Xingxi and Angwin counties, and their city was considered backward. Then the man asked if Fang Ping's QI was really higher than 120. The teenager said that he did not know about it yet, but would find out later. He was surprised that the deputy director was interested in what he was doing. Tang Zheping said that he met Wang Jingyang and he mentioned Fang Ping. As far as he knew, Wang Yang only recognized the capable. Fang Ping replied that he did not understand what the man meant. Tang Zheping changed his tone to a commanding one and said that he hoped the teenager had managed to improve his QI level during his exam preparations. But Fang Ping did not say anything in response and only looked the man in the eye. The deputy principal said that teenagers should know that emotions have a great impact on students' blood and QI. He said that no one knew the results of the test, but asked whether those teenagers were really that strong. The man added that emotional control of blood and QI could be an advantage. Fang Ping thought that Tang Jeping wanted the teenager to affect the emotions of other students in the county and district, and said that it was unreasonable. Moreover, if blood and QI were released before the exam, it could affect the testing. Tang Jeping replied that Fang Ping could be sure that he would be given a pill after the exam for blood and QI as compensation. He went on to say that to become a martial artist, you have to go into battle with courage. It is not the style of a martial artist to sympathize with your opponent. Fan Ping liked the idea that a martial arts master had to fight, and so he agreed, shook hands and said he would try. Suddenly, Tang Jeping felt sick. His expression changed dramatically. Mentally, he shouted out the numbers 120 and then 130, and then realized that there was even more to this guy. He definitely has a high level of QI. Meanwhile, other teenagers were walking somewhere in a group and laughing. Suddenly, someone hit one of the girls, and they bumped shoulders. It was Zhan Nan, and she was in pain, and the ignoramus said that in their day, even the lower class wanted to become masters. These words hurt Wu Hao, and he grabbed the rude man by the collar and ordered him to apologize to her immediately. But the offender did not react immediately, so Wu Hao yelled at him again, this time so loudly that everyone heard it. The impudent man asked why they were all screaming, since they were just pieces of garbage in a packed wilderness. Wu Hao was furious and came at him shouting that the scoundrel had done it on purpose. At that moment, someone came up to them and told the guy who had insulted the girl to apologize, otherwise he would regret it. It was Fan Ping, and he came closer to his friends. Suddenly, all the teenagers from other schools got sick and fell to the floor. Fang Ping said he would teach manners instead of parents. The offender could barely get the words out of his mouth. He could not breathe. Tang Jeping watched and was shocked that this energy was comparable to that of cultivators and could not believe that a simple student had done it. Suddenly, the deputy director of the Ministry of Education approached Director Jin and asked if the man knew the teenager. The events moved to the medical examination center. Everyone was worried and afraid, waiting. But also teenagers discussed Fan Ping that he had great strength and high QI and blood levels. Of course, the guy was pleased that he had intimidated these children, who had never experienced anything like this before, when suddenly someone grabbed Fan Ping's arm abruptly, and in a second there was no trace of the teenager. It was Tang Jeping, and he grabbed the teenager and put him in a cell. The man aggressively ordered Fan Ping to take a pill. According to him, the teenager will become a stronger martial artist. Fang Ping was in open shock, not knowing what to do or how to react, so the teenager decided to refuse the offer, saying that he could not do what Tang Jeping wanted. Fang Ping said that the effect of this substance was so strong that he was not even sure that his bones could withstand it. There was a risk of death. Tang Jeping proved that everything would be fine, and this pill would help to increase the QI and energy score to 149. But Fan Ping refused, saying the risk was too great. Then, the man's tone changed and became rude, and he said that it was an order from the director of the Ministry of Education, Jin Kei-min. And then he added that one should not reject the help of a third-stage cultivator because it will not end well. Fang Ping was amused that this old fox was even threatening him. The teenager asked for the third-stage cultivator, and then added that he had heard that Brother Wang had recently moved to the third stage and asked me to call him to find out what he had to say about it. These words seemed to make Tang Jeping's heartbeat quicken. Then he put his hands on the teenager's shoulders and apologized in a calm tone, saying that he was really in a desperate situation and asked Fan Ping to help him by offering something in return. Then a smile appeared on the teenager's face. It seemed that he had been waiting for this. Fan Ping asked for 2 first-stage pills for QI and blood and 2 million in cash. Tang Jeping thought that right now the director was in a hurry, so he would not refuse even such a large request. Then Fang Ping happily left their hiding place, and in the end he told the man to ask for 3 pills and that Tang Jeping would keep the last one for himself. The man was shocked that the teenager thought he would benefit from it as well. Tang Jeping realized that Fang Ping was not as simple as he seemed at first glance. Meanwhile, the events moved to a laboratory-like room. The screen showed photos of students and brief information about them. Principal Jin looked at this and wondered if there were any students with QI and blood counts above 120. When suddenly, the man found Fan Ping's profile, but his level was still being measured. Then Principal Jin ordered everyone to immediately observe the teenager. Fang Ping was in his own cell, looking at the CCTV camera. The teenager did not expect the room to be so closed and with a camera. So Fang Ping decided it was time for him to cheat a little. He had a system, so he had to use the first stage pill for QI and blood. Just use one regular one to fool them. So the teenager swallowed it. The sensations were not the same as before, even if it's just a regular pill for QI and blood. But its strength was different from the system. There was no need to clean it. The rest of the pill dissolved and reached the teenager's brain. Then, it was like an electric shock went through his whole body. It was a strange feeling, unpleasant at times. The QI level was 103, but then it started to grow to 119. Director Jin was worried and sweating profusely. After all, if Fang Ping took his help, he would not be able to reach the limit. Then the man will not let him go under no circumstances. When suddenly the QI and blood counts showed a figure of 149, and a smile appeared on Director Jin's face. He was pleased with himself. Meanwhile, the events moved to a medical examination center, a conference room. The man said that the Minister of Education had issued an order to raise the minimum level of QI, and the current value must be at least 115. The students simply exploded after these words. Everyone was outraged and shouted that it was too much. The man went on to say that, as always, everything depended on the students themselves, so he asked for silence to begin with and continued. He began to call out the names of the students and their level. Wu Hao sat next to Fang Ping and asked how the teenager could be so calm given the new demands, to which Fan Ping asked if it was really that difficult. Wu Hao did not like his classmates' arrogance and self-confidence and asked him what his QI level was. Fang Ping looked to the side, stretched out the time, and answered that it was 149. Wu Hao patted the teenager on the shoulder and laughed, saying that humor was always a good idea, especially in such a stressful situation. The man continued to speak and said Yang Jian's name. He had 116 and passed. The teenager was very happy and did not hide it. Then they called Wu Hao. He had 120 and also passed. The neighbor looked at Fang Ping smugly. Finally, it was his turn. The man said his name, Fan Ping, and then paused. The man's body began to tremble and he told everyone to congratulate the teenager. With an incredible result of 149 QI units and first place in the city. Everyone looked at the teenager in shock, but Fan Ping kept his face straight and was just pleased with himself. The students immediately started whispering and asking who Fan Ping was. No one knew about him. Wu Hao continued to disbelieve, saying that this could not have happened. Fang Ping said that his classmate should at least believe the teacher. The man announced that the list was over, and then added that those who did not pass should not be upset. After all, they will have another chance next year. The tears of disappointed students flowed like a river. Zhan Nan couldn't calm down because her family had suffered so much to allow her to participate. She didn't know how to explain it to her parents. Fang Ping looked at her and sympathized. The world of martial arts has never been fair. Taking into account the costs of improving QI, ordinary families could not even come close to success. Then, Fang Ping put his hand on Zhan Nan's shoulder and called out to the girl. He smiled and said that it must have been hard for her to hold it together for so long, so she needed a distraction. Fang Ping called her to buy potato chips, and they were supposed to help her because Zhan Nan loved chips. The girl looked at Fang Ping with wet eyes as if she were her last hope. Then other classmates swooped in on Zhan Nan, some supporting her and telling her to go eat, others saying that with her strength, she would definitely pass the exam next year. This touched the girl even more. She could hardly hold back her tears. Then Zhan Nan stood up from her seat and told everyone to go and buy potato chips. Fang Ping was pleased with himself once again for being able to cheer up his friend. Meanwhile, the company was already returning from the store with a large pile of packages. Suddenly a man approached them and asked if the teenagers thought their world was wrong. 7 billion people put their fates on this unfair test. People could not break these rules, but why? The teenagers stood silently and looked at the man, not understanding what was happening. He went on to say that chaos, stupidity, and injustice flourished in the world, but the gods would send them true leaders to protect them. The man invited the teenagers to join them, and they would receive a special class taught by a mentor. Fang Ping was curious about the man. The stranger then urged the teenagers to join their ranks, and then they will all be placed in a special class with a main mentor. Fang Ping seemed to be negative about the idea. The teenagers started whispering, and all of them said as one that it was time to run away. And then, they all ran away from the crazy man at the same time. But he managed to grab one of them by the arm, It was Jean Nan, and the man told her to wait because he had something else to show them. The girl screamed for the madman to let her go. The man replied that she shouldn't have worried, because he wouldn't hurt her, and his offer was meant to satisfy them. At this point, Fan Ping ordered Jiang Nan to be released quickly. Suddenly, the man felt pain and pressure all over his body. The teenager did it again. It was the only way he could show his husband that he had done bad things. Jiang Nan seized the moment and grabbed her arm. She quickly ran to her friends and hid behind the boys. Fang Ping thought it was a sect, and probably many such groups had the courage to recruit people in broad daylight. Wu Hao told his classmate to leave the man alone because they had to leave. Fang Ping took a deep breath and thought that it was really none of his business, and he was no good at getting into trouble now. So the teenagers left, and Fan Ping thought it best to concentrate on the upcoming tests. And the man stood there with a sly face, looking at the teenagers. Events happened quickly. People gathered around the school for tests. Were like basic sports tests, several types, including running and throwing a ball, and specialized tests. Fang Ping seemed to pass all of them successfully. Finally, it was all over, and the happy teenagers left the building. They were greeted by a crowd of people shouting with joy. Fan Ping tried to get through the crowd. A white car was parked nearby, and the people in it screamed when they saw the teenager. It seemed like they were waiting for him. The driver was that crazy man who recognized the student with the huge QI pressure. His friend said that such sprouts have great potential for cultivation, and that their future will definitely be extraordinary. Another man shouted behind them, calling them damn lucky. A friend said that the sins of these people are unforgivable and cannot be forgotten. It was their duty to cleanse the souls of these people. There were many men in the car with different weapons. The woman said that she left the rest to them, but she wanted to take care of this one. The car door opened and men ran out. It was loud. Many people were running to school at the same time. When they reached the students, they immediately attacked the poor teenagers. A fight broke out. The crowd fled, but some were less fortunate. Healthy, ignorant adults attacked innocent teenagers. They didn't even have anything to defend themselves with. Fang Ping had managed to get away from the school and did not understand what was happening when the crowd began to run away screaming. Then the woman approached him and asked where the teenager was going. She ran by Fan Ping and told him that before he left, he had to sacrifice his soul to God. The teenager felt something run by him. The woman attacked the teenager, but he managed to put up a block. When suddenly, he felt pain. He could not understand whether these people were trained by masters of the martial arts. Finally, Fan Ping saw the woman's face, and she had a familiar tattoo on it. The teenager also saw this symbol on the man from the sect. Fang Ping bounced off the ground sharply, and I just floated in the air. And in my head, I was thinking that these people were trying to take revenge on him. After that, he struck the woman in the leg, but she repelled him. Fang Ping felt that it was very painful, and he would not be able to stand it for so long, because he had not even learned any techniques. Then the opponent struck him. Fang Ping did not have time to dodge, so he flew straight to the floor. Her eyes blazing, she swung to hit the teenager again. Fang Ping sensed the danger and realized that he had to act quickly and come up with something. So he knocked the woman down with his foot. She did not expect this and faltered, and then just punched the ground instead of Fang Ping. It was so close the teenager's face could have been significantly damaged. After all, these people were trying to kill him. The woman created a crack in the asphalt with just one punch, a skill she was supposed to be a master of. Fang Ping defeated that neighboring cultivator only because he was preparing for a fight, and he faced a martial artist again. And now the teenager is definitely finished. He will die near the school, just like that. When suddenly someone hit this woman and she flew backwards at high speed. Blood spilled over everything and everyone, and the woman just flew away and hit the school fence. In front of Fan Ping was a healthy man looking very strong and serious. He just brushed the blood off his fist and said that he never thought that this company would make a mess of the testing center. Fang Ping was wetting himself. His face bore the marks of battle, and the teenager didn't even know what to say. Then the man looked at the student and asked if he was injured. Fang Ping looked at this woman who was lying on the floor and showed no signs of life. The teenager was shocked and disgusted at the same time. This man broke the woman's skull with one blow, and he was incredibly strong. But the picture made Fang Ping feel nauseous. The man asked the teenager if he was okay, and then said that any student who saw such vomiting scenes would not be okay. After some time and characteristic sounds had passed, the rescuer asked Fan Ping if he was feeling better. The teenager wiped his mouth and asked who he was. It turned out to be a representative of a detective bureau. Fang Ping asked later who the attackers were. The man said they were just a bunch of psychos, but the teenager was furious and shouted that it was no time for jokes. Fang Ping stood up and asked if the psychos' messes were over. He couldn't stop screaming and saying that this woman had just tried to kill him. The detective looked down, realizing that something was wrong with this guy. Fang Ping also looked down and seemed to calm down. Then the man tried to calm the teenager down, saying that Joyang had already sent the Ministry of Defense and the Detective Bureau to clear out new culprits within the city, and promised that this would not happen again. At that moment, Tang Jeping ran to the boys and shouted to Fan Ping to see if he was injured. The man quickly grabbed the teenager and pounced with questions about whether he had any blood or wounds and ordered him to get checked by Fan Ping as soon as possible. But the detective calmed Tang down. It seemed that they knew each other. The detective asked if he was the teenager with the highest QI score in the city. The man's name was Lao Zhang. Tang Jeping turned to the detective and asked if it was not a simple riot this time. Lao Zhang took out his cigarettes and confirmed the man's guess. He added that this was not the first time these people had attacked new graduates. The detective went on to say that this gang was a group of psychotic haters. For them, graduates are a hated, privileged class that simply hasn't yet understood the meaning and hasn't had time to gain strength. They were the best target for revenge. Lao Zhang went on to say that he could not even imagine that they would go so far on the road to revenge that they would commit a massacre right in the testing center, and moreover, one of them was a cultivator. Tang Jeping was furious at these words that these people had brought a cultivator with them. Lao Zhang added that this cultivator had just attacked Fang Ping, but now he was no longer a threat. Tang Janip continued to be indignant, but was glad that the detective had arrived in time, otherwise they would have lost an outstanding genius. Fan Ping listened to all this and clenched his fists in anger. After all, he was only attacked by a cultivator and the teenager was already unarmed. Now it was just a coincidence. But what will happen next time? Fang Ping was angry because the gateway to the martial art world was too dangerous. How could he climb up if he had to suffer through an ordinary cultivator? Meanwhile, a police officer approached them and reported that they had captured all the psychos. 20 students were seriously injured, and 6 students had multiple fractures, and possibly them. Lao Zhichan interrupted the man, but he finished his thought by saying that they might not be able to practice martial arts anymore. Tang Jeping put his hand on his friend's shoulder and told him to focus on the criminals. The Ministry of Education would take care of the rest. The man replied that leaving it to the ministry would only cause more problems. After that, Tang Jeping continued to spin around Fang Ping and inspect that the subterranean was indeed not injured. Fan Ping interrupted the man when he was taking a bandage from him, and then asked Tang Jeping with a serious face to tell the teenager about combat tactics. The first thing the man did was ask why the teenager needed it, if he wanted to learn it. Fang Ping clearly and confidently confirmed his opinion. The teenager wanted to become stronger for his own safety. Tang Jeping put his hand on the teenager's shoulder and said that he would soon enter the university and they would teach him there. There was no reason to rush. Although many things were learned in practice, and this was difficult in peacetime, Fang Ping was shattered. Did this mean that Master Ma, Tang Jeping, the detective, they all did not know about combat tactics? The man noticed the teenager's surprised look and understood everything, saying that there was nothing to be surprised about because there are many cultivators in the world who have not practiced combat tactics. In fact, it was a very heavy load on the body. Moreover, Tang Jeping did not need the combat tactics he had learned in the past. Even the incident that the Bureau was investigating had nothing to do with them. The man told Fang Ping that he should become an entrepreneur, like most cultivators. Of course, the teenager could have joined the Bureau, like those who were bored, but that would have been life-threatening. Then Tang Jeping called the teenager to leave, because he had to wash and change into a new uniform, and the man would visit his parents for a while. Fang Ping tried to call Wang Yang to share that most cultivators weren't as cool as they seemed, but the guy was out of range. The teenager wondered where his brother Van had gone, not even answering his phone, and he wanted to know the details of the martial art. Tang Jeping was driving Fan Ping in the car and asked if anyone was home. The teenager said that he was not. The man also pulled out his phone and shouted with joy. At that moment, Fan Ping received a notification on his phone. It was from a bank, and it said that Tang Jeping had sent the teenager 200,000 yuan on his card. Fang Ping was so busy with his exams that he forgot about it. He didn't expect Tang and the principal to actually send him money. Tang Jeping said that the teenager did well on the day of the QI measurement, so he received the award. After that, the man held out his fist to Fan Ping and told her to cheer up and do everything right. But the teenager remained silent, so Tang Jeping told him to punch him and added that he was optimistic about Fan Ping's future. These words motivated the teenager, and his eyes lit up again. And then Fan Ping punched Tang Jeping hard. The man smiled slyly and shook his hand. This was expected from a man who was taught by Wang Jingyan, who has great ambitions. The cult was coming to an end, and Fan Ping was lucky to survive. But it didn't matter. The teenager would now look only forward, as Tang had told him. The events moved to Fan Ping's house. There was a lot of firecrackers and joy. Fan Ping's parents and sister congratulated her on this incredible achievement. But all the congratulations went straight to Tang Jingping, who did not understand what was happening. The family was also shocked and looked at the man with serious expressions. At that moment, Fan Ping appeared behind him and was about to introduce Tang Jeping to the family. But before he could say a word, his family rushed to congratulate him. Fan Ping interrupted their joy by saying that it was the deputy director of education. The family was shocked. My parents started to look around for the man because they hadn't expected him to come. Tang Jeping was uncomfortable with the attention. Fang Yuan said it was very cool that the deputy director of the Ministry of Education gave him a ride home, but the teenager did not even understand what he wanted. Tang Jeping apologized for the unexpected visit and wanted to start explaining the purpose of the visit. The man began by saying that not many people in the ministry can support a child like this until they enter the university. And then he said that they probably had a son to raise. And then he asked if they wouldn't mind hiring my father as a security guard for the Ministry of Education. The salary was 5,000 plus insurance. My father was shocked at the price, but did not have time to express his delight when his daughter jumped on him, shouting how cool it was. Fan Ping also said that it would have been better if his father had accepted Tang Jeping's request. The man had no choice but to agree. Tang Jeping had done everything he could, so he got up and said he had to go. His parents wanted to keep him for lunch, but he refused. Fan Ping said he would see him off. The family discussed how kind Tang Jeping had been to them. The mother suggested that they call her husband to the table later. Fan Ping closed the door behind the guest and asked his mother if she was free tomorrow. The father asked what was wrong, because his son's tone was strange. The guy said that the ministry had allocated them an apartment so they could look at it tomorrow. They were all shocked by the news. Only cries of shock could be heard from the house. And when the family got to the building, they couldn't believe their eyes. It was all strange for my parents, but my sister quickly got used to it. My father said that it was the first time he had ever seen such a large apartment given as a reward. My mother also did not believe in such generosity. Then the father turned to his son and asked if the apartment was really an award from the Ministry of Education. Fan Ping did not expect such a question from his parents. He seemed a little confused and started to give himself away. He was thinking about whether to tell the truth. But the parents quickly turned their attention to the expensive furniture and appliances in the apartment. They took everything for granted. Fan Ping told his parents that the ministry had made a big exception, so he asked them not to tell anyone about the gift. My sister was shouting from the top floor that there was a TV set upstairs as well. Meanwhile, the news was reporting that a strong earthquake had struck and many houses were destroyed. Fan Ping suddenly remembered that in his past life, a strong earthquake had struck on the same day. As far as the teenager could remember, there had been more victims in the past. Is it all thanks to the martial arts masters? The news said that thanks to a warning from the masters, the earthquake did not cause major losses. The man also offered to work together to restore the destroyed house. Fan Ping realized that martial artists were not as useless as Tang had said. The teenager had already taken a step into the world of martial arts, so there was no turning back. And as long as Fan Ping continued to grow stronger, everything would go as it should. Suddenly, Wang Yang called the teenager's phone. Fan Ping immediately asked if his brother was okay, because he hadn't been able to call him for several days, to which Wang said that he was on a mission out of town. Wang Yang said he saw the message from the teenager and congratulated him on his QI level. Fan Ping said it was all thanks to him. Then my brother asked why the teenager was really calling him. Fan Ping got down to business, but he came from a long way off. He said that he actually finished the preliminary bone hardening technique a few days ago, and his QI score has already exceeded 150. Wang Yang asked if the teenager now wanted to become a master. Fan Ping objected, saying that he was not ready for it. Now his QI has grown very much, but there was a slow process of bone hardening. So he wanted to ask Wang Yang about martial arts techniques, and added that he would like to learn them. The brother said that the tactics were indeed very important, but it was not the best idea for Fan Ping right now. Wang Yang went on to say that 150 units is the minimum to get to the master level, but they had a different goal. He added that now Fang Ping has not only gained more than 150 units, but has also successfully completed the first stage of bone strengthening. If he starts practicing tactics now, it will be of no use in the future, because the more QI, the better in the future. Wang Yang said that Fang Ping had to strengthen his bones twice to achieve the long-term goal. The teenager did not count on it. He thought it would be easier.